After the divorce, my ex-husband got into a car accident and lost his memory. When he woke up, the man who had always been so cold to me was a mess of tears and snot, grabbing my sleeve and begging, "Honey, please don't leave me." I frowned and pushed his hand away. Where did this stray puppy come from? Don't go around calling just anyone your husband. My ex looked at me with teary eyes. I'm your little puppy, not a stray. I had just gotten off work when I got the call from Thomas's assistant. His voice on the other end was frantic. "Mr. Alex, you need to get to the hospital right away. Mr. Thomas, he's been in a car accident." You've got to be kidding me. A car crash right after we divorced? I swear I didn't jinx him. I got the hospital address from his assistant and rushed over in a cab. When I got to Thomas's room, his assistant looked at me like I was his savior. "Mr. Alex, thank God you're here. Go on in. Mr. Thomas has been asking for you ever since he woke up." He paused, then added in a hesitant whisper, "I think he might have scrambled his brains a little." Scrambled his brains? I frowned and pushed the door open. Thomas was lying listlessly on the hospital bed with an 4 in his arm and a bandage wrapped around his head. He was a handsome man, and right now he had a kind of fragile beauty, like he might shatter at any moment. At the sound of the door, he instinctively looked over. When he saw me, his eyes, which were usually devoid of any emotion, instantly lit up. The next second, I heard him say in a wounded tone, "Honey, what took you so long? I've been waiting forever." Huh? Was this really Thomas? If it weren't for that familiar face, I would have sworn it was a different person. In 3 years of marriage, I could count the number of times he'd smiled on one hand, let alone act all cute with me. Yep, his brain was definitely scrambled. Thank God we're divorced, I thought, looking into Thomas's clear, dopey eyes. When I didn't respond, the light in his eyes instantly dimmed. I could almost feel an invisible puppy tail behind him droop. "Honey, why aren't you talking to me?" Thomas's voice sounded even more hurt. Seeing him like this, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But I still hit him with the cold, hard truth. "I'm not your husband. We're divorced." After I said it, Thomas just stared blankly for a second. Then, his eyes welled up, and a moment later, huge teardrops started rolling down his cheeks. I was dumbfounded, watching him burst into tears on command. I just stood there, frozen. I mean, come on, he was a total CEO type before the amnesia. Were tears really that cheap? Thomas yanked the 4 needle out of his hand, threw off the covers, and scrambled off the bed barefoot. He moved so fast, it was like he was afraid I was going to bolt. By the time I realized what was happening, he was right next to me, clutching my sleeve. He sniffled, his voice choked with sobs. "Honey, please don't leave me." Thomas's handsome face was now a mess of tears, as if he'd suffered some terrible injustice. Seeing that pathetic look on his face, a mischievous thought popped into my head. I put on a cool voice. "Where'd this stray puppy come from? Stop calling me your husband. I'm your puppy, not a stray, wah." And with that, he started crying even harder, sniffling nonstop. His nose was running, and he was on the verge of a full-on snot bubble, but he was too scared to let go of me in case I ran off. All he could do was keep sniffling. He looked so pitiful I almost burst out laughing. I started walking toward the bedside table. Seeing that I wasn't heading for the door, Thomas didn't try to stop me, just shuffled along with me. I pulled 2 tissues from the box on the nightstand and handed them to him. "Wipe your face, and stop crying. We just got divorced, it's not like I died." Honestly, the way he was crying, you'd think he was a widower. Thomas looked at me with watery eyes and took the tissues. I pressed the call button by the bed. A minute later, a nurse came in. I gently patted Thomas's head. "Be a good boy and let's get this 4 back in." Thomas wiped his tears and obediently held out his hand for the nurse to reinsert the needle, but his other hand still had a death grip on me. I needed to talk to the doctor about his condition. I softened my voice, trying to coax him. "Hey, you stay here and finish your 4, okay? I'm just going to step out and talk to the doctor about how you're doing." Thomas whimpered, "Honey, you're not going to leave and not come back, are you?" I shook my head. When he still hesitated, unwilling to let go, I asked, "Didn't you just say you wanted to be my little puppy?" Is this how a good boy acts? At that, Thomas immediately let go of my sleeve. I am being good, he said urgently. I'll listen to you, honey. Just promise you'll come back. Don't leave me. The look in the nurse's eyes screamed, you kids and your weird games. I followed the nurse out of the room, told the assistant at the door to keep an eye on Thomas, and headed to the doctor's office. Thomas had only injured his head, the rest of his body was fine. The doctor said the impact might have caused memory loss, and the drastic change in personality was likely a side effect of the amnesia. As for why he only remembered that I was his husband, the doctor's explanation was, it's possible that before the accident, his feelings for you were the strongest, which is why you're the only thing he remembers. The strongest feelings? I wasn't buying it. My marriage to Thomas was one of convenience. He needed my family's help to secure his position as the head of his family's corporation. So he married me, even though I was a man. And me? A big part of why I agreed was because of his face. He was exactly my type. Plus, I got plenty of benefits out of the marriage too. A mutually beneficial arrangement, who wouldn't like that? But Thomas clearly had no intention of being tied to me forever, so we signed an agreement. A divorce after 3 years. I used to fantasize about whether a marriage first, love later scenario could happen to me. But one look at Thomas's cold demeanor was enough to kill that fantasy. So we lived together like polite, respectful strangers. Snapping out of my thoughts, I returned to the hospital room. Thomas was staring blankly out the window, his expression unreadable. For a split second, I thought he hadn't lost his memory at all. He looked so much like his old self. But when he heard me come in, he turned his head. The moment he saw it was me, a brilliant smile bloomed on his pale, handsome face, like ice melting in the sun. Honey, you're back. I walked over and cupped his exquisite face in my hand. Thomas nuzzled against my palm. His eyes, still a little red from crying, were fixed on me, his amber irises reflecting nothing but my face. He really was like a little puppy. I wondered how he'd react when he got his memory back and remembered how he acted while he had amnesia. A small smile played on my lips. You keep calling me honey, honey, but do you even know my name? At that, a hurt look crept back into Thomas's eyes. He mumbled, I can't remember clearly. Will you tell me, honey? My name is Alex. Thomas nodded and said obediently, my dear Alex. His voice was beautiful, deep and magnetic. I froze, a tingling sensation spreading through my chest. But we had already signed the divorce papers. Besides, Thomas had amnesia. If I let him cling to me now, let myself fall for him, I'd be the one getting hurt when his memory came back. With that thought, my smile faded. I pulled my hand back from his face and repeated the words I'd said before. Stop calling me honey. I'm not your husband. Thomas's eyes widened slightly. A new film of moisture appeared in them. He couldn't understand why his husband, who had just been smiling at him, had turned cold so quickly. Seeing that he was on the verge of crying again, I was about to tell him to stop. But then he said, then, can I be your wife instead? Hubby Alex. Before I could react, he sat up and threw his arms around me, burying his head in my chest. His voice was muffled and laced with a faint sob. Hubby, please don't leave me. Oh God, I think he's really got me. I mean, who could say no to being called hubby? Especially when the person saying it has a face you're completely obsessed with. Did Thomas's amnesia come with a whole new personality? I looked down at the pathetic man in my arms and just couldn't bring myself to push him away. Damn it. My weakness for a pretty face was going to be the death of me. I let him cling to me, and it was only when evening came that I had to go home. Naturally, Thomas didn't want me to leave. He whined and fussed, insisting on coming home with me. Luckily, his injuries weren't too serious. He could recover at home as long as he got his 4-drip on schedule every day. With a sigh, I went through the discharge process and took him home. Back home, I wasn't hungry myself, so I asked the housekeeper to make something light for Thomas and went to my room. That's right, we'd always slept in separate rooms. Thomas followed me all the way to my bedroom door, and only when I said, "Go eat. Are you being naughty again?" did he reluctantly trudge off to the dining room, looking back every few steps. After he left, I took a shower. I had just finished when there was a knock on the door. I could faintly hear Thomas calling hubby a few times. I dried off, threw on a bathrobe, and went to open the door. I hadn't tied the robe very tightly. When I opened the door, I saw Thomas's gaze fixed intently on my chest. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Hubby," he asked tentatively, can I bite your collarbone?" I was about to say no, but before I could get the word out, he leaned in. The next second, I felt a warm sensation on my collarbone. It was less of a bite and more of a lick. A tingling itch spread through my whole body. I tried to push him away, but then I heard him whisper, "Hubby, you smell so good." With that, he tried to squeeze past me into the room. I snapped back to reality and blocked his way. "What are you doing?" Thomas looked at me with an expression of pure innocence. "I came to sleep with my hubby, of course. Your room is upstairs." Thomas paused, confused. "Why do we sleep in separate rooms?" I gently pushed him back. "You'll know when you get your memory back," I said, pushing him again, but he didn't budge. I looked up and saw that his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "Hubby, don't kick me out." Then he threw his arms around me again, burying his head in the crook of my neck. His voice was thick with hurt and choked with sobs. "Hubby, please don't punish me for his mistakes. Okay? He is him and I am me. Whatever he did in the past to make you hate him and divorce him, it has nothing to do with me." His logic almost short-circuited my brain. Just as I was about to say something, Thomas let go of me. His eyes were still shimmering with tears as he looked at me expectantly. "Hubby, marry me." "Huh?" The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. Thomas seized the opportunity, slipped past me, and in 2 quick strides, dived onto my bed. "Hubby's bed is so soft. Can you let me stay for just one night? I'll be super quiet when I sleep. I'm all clean, and I don't take up much space. Please, hubby. Please?" Looking at his nearly 6'3" frame, I had my doubts about that last part. "Oh, whatever. Just for one night." I sighed internally and turned to close the door. When Thomas saw me shut the door, his face visibly lit up with joy. He unbuttoned a few buttons on his shirt, revealing a glimpse of the smooth, sculpted muscles beneath, like a masterpiece of a statue with a corner of its veil lifted. "Hubby can do whatever he wants to me tonight," he finished, his handsome face blushing as he looked at me shyly. To be honest, it was a novel experience seeing Thomas try to seduce me with his looks. Even if it was amnesiac Thomas, I felt like the current Thomas was like a Samoyed puppy, part dog, part fox. But seeing the white gauze bandage wrapped around his head, I forced a tight smile and said heartlessly, "Let's get you healed up first. I'm not interested in patience. Tonight, it's strictly sleeping." Thomas's shyness turned to disappointment. Then, as if he'd thought of something, his face lit up with anticipation again. "Does that mean we can do other things once I'm better?" Afraid he'd keep pushing, I gave him a non-committal answer. "We'll see how you behave." Thomas didn't seem to mind the vague response. He nodded, slipped under the covers, and looked at me. "Okay, come to bed, hubby." Looking at him, I suddenly felt like our roles could be reversed. Maybe I could be the one on top. Ugh, stop it. We're divorced. I shouldn't be thinking about this stuff. I cleared the random thoughts from my head and, under Thomas's sparkling gaze, got into bed. I slept soundly all night. When I woke up the next morning, the spot next to me was empty. Why was Thomas up so early? His brain was on the fritz, so he didn't have to work for now. Why not sleep in? Pushing the question aside, I got dressed, washed up, and went downstairs. The scene that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. By the dining table, Thomas, wearing an apron, had just placed a bowl of porridge on the table. Hearing me come downstairs, he looked up and said proudly, "Hubby, come eat. I made breakfast." Seeing him looking like a virtuous little homemaker, I couldn't help but smile, a warmth spreading through my chest. So that's why he was up so early, to make me breakfast. Thomas knew how to cook. He'd learned during his years studying abroad, living on his own. Unfortunately, I'd barely ever tasted his cooking. I never thought his culinary skills would survive the amnesia. I walked to the table and looked at the delicious-smelling and beautifully presented breakfast. I reached out and gently patted Thomas's head. "Thank you for breakfast." Thomas's voice was cheerful. "If you like it, hubby, I'll make it for you every day." Suddenly, I really wish Thomas would stay like this forever. After breakfast, the private doctor we employed came over to give Thomas his 4-drip. I told him to be good and listen to the doctor, then left for the office. On the way to work, I thought about everything that had happened. It all felt like a surreal dream. I was supposed to be cutting ties with him, and now we were tangled up together again against my will. My hand unconsciously rested on my chest, feeling my steady heartbeat. Being with the amnesiac Thomas, feeling his affection, always made my heart beat a little faster. I just hoped that when it was time to cut ties for a second time, I could be just as calm as I was the first. My mind was a mess the whole way there. I didn't even realize we'd arrived at the office until the driver told me. I pushed my chaotic thoughts aside and walked into the company. I wouldn't let my personal feelings interfere with my work. I had a partnership to negotiate this morning. If this deal went through, it would bring in a lot of profit for the company. At the scheduled time, the representatives from the other company came into the office with their documents. And I saw someone I never expected to see. The other person was clearly excited to see me. "Alex, I can't believe this is your company." The young man in front of me was handsome, and his tailored, dark gray suit made him look even more sharp and tall. His smile was bright, with a hint of boyish charm. I smiled back at him. "Evan, I never thought we'd meet again in a place like this." As I spoke, I couldn't help but recall what I knew about Evan. He went to the same university as me. A lot of people had crushes on him back then, but I never saw him date anyone or get successfully pursued. He was always sticking close to me. At the time, I even suspected he might have a crush on me. But he never said anything before I graduated, so I figured I was just overthinking it. We hadn't really kept in touch after graduation. Evan smiled sheepishly. "I just took over the family business. My dad wants me to get some experience, so he put me in charge of this deal. But since it's your company, Alex, we don't even need to negotiate. Let's just sign the contract." With that, he handed me the contract they had prepared. I shook my head and said seriously, "We can't be that hasty. I still need to go over the terms our company is offering." Evan nodded obediently. "Whatever you say, Alex." I gave him a rundown of the general situation, the future prospects, and so on. Evan seemed to be listening intently, but his gaze was fixed on me the entire time. After I finished, Evan eagerly signed the contract and handed it to me to sign. "I don't see any problems. I'm happy to partner with you, Alex." Seeing how quickly he signed, I didn't hesitate and signed it as well. Once I finished signing, Evan checked the time and then asked expectantly, "It's lunchtime. Let me treat you to a meal, Alex." I instinctively glanced at my phone. Thomas had sent me a message. "Thomas, hubby, can you come home for lunch? I'll cook for you again." A little while later, another message from Thomas. "Thomas, you're not answering, so I'm just gonna assume that's a yes. I'm starting to cook now." I replied, "Okay." Then I turned to Evan with an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I have to eat at home today. Lunch is already made." A look of disappointment crossed Evan's face, but a second later he asked hopefully, "Can I come over and crash lunch at your place then?" This time I really couldn't refuse. I could only nod and say, "Okay." We left the company together. I was about to call my driver, but Evan said he had driven too and could be my chauffeur. I looked at the few other people who had come with him. What about them? Evan gave them a look, and one of them immediately spoke up. It's fine. You take the car, sir. We'll grab a cab back." After saying that, they headed off to the side. Evan gave me an innocent blink. "Shall we go, Alex?" I could only give a helpless smile and follow him to his car. Before we got in, Evan thoughtfully opened the passenger door for me. On the way, Evan started by chatting about our old school days, then casually asked, "Alex, did you get a divorce?" I nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" Evan didn't answer right away. After a moment of silence, as if he'd made up his mind, he asked hesitantly, In that case, can I ask you out? I was stunned. Huh? No way, Evan really did like me? Evan continued, I've had a crush on you for a long time. I only realized it after you graduated. I was gonna confess, but then I heard you got engaged to that guy from the Thomas family. I thought for a moment, so this partnership, you planned it? I turned my head to look at him. Evan's ears started to turn red. He let out a soft then asked again, Can I ask you out, Alex? I shook my head. No, we're not a good match. I still had this whole situation with Thomas to deal with, and now Evan was in the mix. I was exhausted. Evan, oh, I get it. So that means I can. I won't disappoint you, Alex. Me. Evan smiled again. Just kidding. But come on, Alex, just give me a chance. Took me so much courage to finally confess to you. I changed the subject, not wanting to discuss it any further. My house wasn't far from the company, and we arrived shortly. Walking into the yard, Evan exclaimed, Wow, Alex, your house is huge and so fancy. It'd be great if I could live here someday. I gave him a bewildered look. Can't your family afford a place like this? Evan's smile froze on his face, and then he grumbled, You really don't get it? Do you, Alex? I was still confused. As we were talking, we reached the front door. I opened it and was greeted by a cheerful voice. Hubby, you're finally home. I missed you so much. Thomas, who was in the living room, stood up and looked towards the door with a huge smile. But when he saw Evan behind me, Thomas's smile faded significantly. He frowned slightly and asked, Hubby, who is he? Evan asked in surprise, Alex, you're still living together after the divorce? Is it because Mr. Thomas won't leave? Then he added with an understanding smile, It's okay. I get it. You're such a catch, Alex. Mr. Thomas probably can't handle being apart from you. I rubbed my temples, my head starting to throb. I explained to Thomas, This is Evan. He's my partner on the new project. As I finished, Evan added, Alex and I went to the same university. We were super close back then, right, Alex? I looked at Thomas's face, which was quickly darkening like a storm cloud about to burst, and shot Evan a glare. Why are you trying to provoke him? I was genuinely afraid Thomas was going to burst into tears right in front of Evan. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole scene was turning into some kind of dramatic showdown, though maybe that was just my imagination. I didn't answer Evan, just said wearily, Let's just eat. The moment I said it, I saw Thomas's eyes go wide with disbelief. Hubby, he asked, You brought another man home to eat the food I made for you. Oh crap. I was starting to sweat. I swear this was the most difficult situation I've ever been in my entire life. I never anticipated things would turn out this way. And, of course, Evan had to add, Is Mr. Thomas really that petty? It's just a meal. Thomas was silent for a moment, then muttered, Fine, you two eat then. And with that, he turned and went upstairs. Evan was a bit surprised too. He hadn't expected Thomas to be so easily upset by a few words. He looked at me, a little lost. Alex, I didn't mean to. I remember Mr. Thomas being very composed. And I'd heard you two didn't have a good relationship. I said wearily, See the bandage on his head? He got into a car accident, lost his memory, and ever since he woke up, he's been super clingy. Evan mused, Can amnesia change someone's personality? I didn't have time to chat with Evan anymore. I had to go comfort Thomas. If I didn't go check on him, I was seriously worried he might decide to come downstairs without using the stairs. But it wasn't right to just leave a guest here alone. Right now, though, all I could do was give Evan an apologetic smile. I'm so sorry. I need to go check on Thomas first. Why don't you go ahead and eat? A flash of disappointment crossed Evan's eyes. He nodded. It's okay. I'll wait for you guys. I'm really sorry, I said again. Then I hurried upstairs. I had a gut feeling Thomas would be in my room. Sure enough, when I pushed open my bedroom door, I found Thomas hugging his knees, his chin resting on them. There were clear tear tracks on his beautiful face. He looked so heartbreakingly pitiful. For the first time, I felt a pang in my chest, a sour ache. I finally understood what a broken heart felt like. So he'd run off to his room to cry in secret. Or maybe the tears had started falling the moment he turned to go upstairs. I walked over and sat down next to him. "Don't cry," I said softly. Thomas looked at me with tear-filled eyes. His voice choked. "Alex, I'm so jealous I could die." He said, "You were close in college. That means you've known each other for a long time. And I can't even remember my own past." The more he spoke, the more upset he got, and the tears started flowing again. I don't know what came over me, but I cupped his face in my hands and kissed him. Thomas's eyes flew open, and the tears stopped instantly. Then, he pressed his hand to the back of my head and started kissing me back, messy and frantic. When we finally broke apart, both of our faces were flushed. "Still sad?" I asked. Thomas shook his head, his eyes still red, but a goofy grin spread across his face. "Not sad anymore." Hubby kissed me. "I'm so happy." I reached up and wiped the lingering tear stains from his face. "Go wash your face and come downstairs to eat. We have a guest waiting." Thomas nodded. "Right. We can't keep our guest waiting." He put extra emphasis on the word guest. When we got downstairs, Evan saw Thomas's obviously happy expression and my slightly swollen lips. He forced a smile. "Mr. Thomas is surprisingly easy to cheer up." His tone was dripping with sarcasm and a hint of jealousy that was hard to miss. Thomas just snorted. I gave an awkward laugh. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Let's eat." During the meal, Thomas kept putting food on my plate. He called me hubby over and over, his voice all soft and cutesy, with a higher pitch that made his already pleasant voice even more charming. Though, as the one being pampered, I didn't really notice. Evan was silent, eating with a ferocious intensity. Thomas even offered a seemingly concerned piece of advice. "Mr. Evan, you might want to eat a bit more gently. You wouldn't want to accidentally crack a molar." Evan gave a humorless laugh. "Heh, thank you for your concern, Mr. Thomas. Next time I visit, I'll be sure to bring you a case of brain-boosting supplements." It was probably best to just focus on my food. The atmosphere at the table was incredibly strange. After what felt like an eternity, we finished eating. It was about time for me to head back to the office. Thomas looked at me with hopeful eyes. "Hubby, can I go with you? I'm so bored at home by myself." Evan smiled sweetly. "Sorry, Mr. Thomas, but I'd rather not have strangers in my car." Thomas looked at him, bewildered. "Who wants to ride in your car? It's not like I don't have my own." Evan's smile faltered. Thomas turned back to me with a pitiful expression. "Hubby, are you sure you want me driving alone? Can't you drive me, please?" Couldn't say no. I really wasn't comfortable with Thomas driving by himself. I gave Evan an apologetic smile. "Why don't you head back to the company first? I'm so sorry about today." Evan's smile became strained. "It's fine, Alex. I can go back by myself." I nodded and led Thomas toward the garage. As we turned away, Evan's smile completely vanished. He shouldn't have come for lunch. It had completely ruined the good mood from his reunion with Alex. But he had done his research beforehand. Alex and Thomas were divorced, and their marriage had been unhappy. If Thomas was really like this because of amnesia, then once he recovered, he wouldn't be clinging to Alex anymore, right? Waiting for him to recover through treatment would take too long. He couldn't wait. He'd been separated from Alex for too long already. A quick recovery. A bold idea started to form in Evan's mind. But he was still hesitant about whether to go through with it. Mainly because the consequences could be a little severe. Evan thought about it and decided to wait and see, for now. Back at the office, Thomas sat quietly and waited for me to finish work. Evan sent me a message saying he had already left with his team. I breathed a sigh of relief. I really couldn't handle Evan and Thomas in the same room. For the next few days, Thomas would get his 4 at home in the morning, and in the afternoon he'd stick to me at work. Once he was mostly healed, he started clinging to me all day. Evan, on the other hand, would come find me whenever he had a spare moment, which inevitably led to run-ins with Thomas. The moment they saw each other, they'd start trading insults. "Thomas, could you please stop bothering my husband? Have you no shame? Evan, don't think I don't know you two are divorced. This is what you call fair competition." They didn't care where they were, and soon the whole company was gossiping about the three of us. I was so over it. I didn't sign up for this love triangle drama. One day, neither of them showed up. I thought I'd finally get a peaceful day, but then I got a call from our housekeeper. "Mr. Alex, you have to get to the hospital. Something's happened to Mr. Thomas." Her voice was filled with panic. What else could possibly happen to Thomas? A sense of déjà vu washed over me, and a growing unease settled in my heart. When I rushed to the hospital, the housekeeper waiting outside the room told me Thomas was already awake. The look she gave me was full of unspoken words, but I was too preoccupied to notice. I pushed the door open, and my eyes met Thomas's. Next to the bed stood a profusely apologizing Mr. Evan Sr. and a head-bowed Evan. Seeing me enter, Thomas interrupted Evan's father. "Mr. Evan, there's no need to apologize further. Your son is young after all. It's inevitable that he'll make mistakes. However, this does fall into the category of intentional assault, doesn't it? A lesson should probably be taught." He then mentioned several promising projects under the Evan family's control, smiled, and looked at Evan's father. "If you are willing to hand these projects over to the Thomas Corporation, I won't pursue the matter of your son's actions today." At his words, Mr. Evans' expression stiffened for a moment before he managed a strained smile. Of course. I'll be sure to discipline Evan more strictly when we get home." He then shot Evan a glare and dragged him out of the room. Before leaving, Evan turned and glanced at me, his eyes holding a hint of grievance. Seeing the fresh bandage wrapped around Thomas's head, I pretty much understood what had happened. Evan had hit Thomas on the head again. I could guess his motive, and it seemed he had achieved it. Thomas's memory was back. Looking into Thomas's familiar yet distant eyes, a slow, aching feeling spread through my chest. It had been 23 days since Thomas lost his memory. For 23 days, he had clung to me, coming to work with me during the day and insisting on sleeping with me at night. They say it takes about 21 days to form a habit. How long does it take to fall for someone? I didn't know. All I knew was that I had gotten used to having Thomas around, and I had fallen for the clingy, tearful puppy whose eyes saw only me. I took a deep breath and said, trying to sound calm, "Your memory's back?" Thomas looked at me with a complicated expression and grunted, The room fell silent again. We stared at each other for a good 30 seconds before I spoke first. "I'll move out of the villa tomorrow. I should have moved out long ago, really." Thomas's amnesia had just delayed it. I gave a bitter mental smile. Then I heard Thomas ask, "Why would you move out?" I was taken aback. I hadn't expected him to ask that. I answered automatically, "We're divorced." Thomas asked again, "We've been divorced for a while. Why choose to move out now?" "Because you had amnesia before. I had to take care of you." I didn't understand why Thomas was asking questions he already knew the answers to. "You think I don't need to be taken care of now?" I thought for a moment and replied, "If you wanted, I'm sure there would be plenty of people willing to take care of you." "Including you?" For a split second, I wanted to say yes, but he wasn't the Thomas who loved me anymore. I shook my head and repeated, "We're divorced." I expected Thomas to just tell me to leave. I was already being pretty cold. But to my surprise, Thomas asked, "Can we get remarried?" Huh? His question threw my mind into chaos, leaving it completely blank. During his amnesia, Thomas had asked me countless times if we could get remarried. But I was always worried he'd regain his memory, so I never agreed. I never thought I would hear those words from the Thomas whose memory was back. Thomas watched my reaction and let out a low chuckle. "No rush. I'll give you time to think about it." This time, just like the last, Thomas didn't stay in the hospital. I guess that's the perk of having a family doctor on call. It also helped that Evan hadn't hit him too hard. Bringing Thomas home this time felt completely different from before. I didn't even know how to face him. I never felt this way when we were just polite strangers. But after those 23 days, I couldn't go back to being as calm as I used to be, especially since I'd fallen for him. But I was the one who let myself fall. Who else could I blame? That night, after my shower, I was lying in bed alone. The space next to me felt empty. The warm body that used to hold me so passionately was gone. Just as I was thinking that, the door opened. Thomas walked in, wearing a deep gray silk robe. The collar was wide open, and the dark fabric made his skin look even paler. I could see the outline of his abs. My eyes lingered on his chest for a few seconds before I found my voice. "What are you doing here so late?" His answer was identical to the one he'd given the first time he'd come to my room after his amnesia. "I came to sleep with you." I gave the same reply. "Your room is upstairs." Thomas paused, then said, "But we've been sleeping together." I replied instinctively that was different. "How is it different? Isn't it still me? Why was it okay before but not now?" He moved closer as he spoke, cornering me with his questions. I was speechless, unable to answer. I watched, frozen, as he lay down next to me. Thomas wrapped his arm around my waist. I didn't know what to do. My body tensed up, and my heart started to race. "Alex, you've fallen for me." Thomas's voice was certain. Couldn't deny it. He was right, but it was different. I had fallen for him when he had amnesia. As if he could read my mind, Thomas tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. "Alex, don't split me into two people." I don't know if it was my imagination, but I thought I heard a tremor in his voice when he said that. The next day, neither of us mentioned what had happened the night before. Our interactions seemed to have reverted to how they were before the divorce. Except I noticed Thomas was trying to be warmer toward me. I knew he remembered everything from his amnesia. I could see it in his actions. He seemed to be trying to imitate how his amnesiac self had treated me. I was happy to see it. I really disliked his old, cold demeanor, but interacting with him like this still felt a little unnatural. Maybe I thought this is what they call an adjustment period. Thomas still slept in the same bed with me at night. His injury had healed. One evening, I got into bed after my shower, wondering when Thomas would be done with work and come to bed. He had a month's worth of work piled up from his amnesia, so now he had to work late at home every night even after leaving the office. As I was thinking, the bedroom door opened. I instinctively looked toward the door. The next second, my breath caught in my throat. Thomas was wearing a black tailored shirt and matching trousers. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was the pair of black and white animal ears on his head. I couldn't quite tell if they were cat ears or something else. It wasn't until I saw the fluffy tail behind him that I realized they must be puppy ears. Around his pale neck was a striking black collar. A chain hung from the collar, swaying with his every step. A faint blush colored his handsome face. I stared at him, unable to look away. I had to admit, it took very little effort on Thomas's part to completely mesmerize me. Thomas walked up to me and held out the chain. I remember when I first lost my memory, I said I wanted to be your puppy. And you seemed to prefer the me from when I had amnesia. But I'll listen to you from now on. I won't do a worse job than he did. "Alex, hubby, will you let me be your dog?" With every word he spoke, his face, though still slightly flushed, turned a deeper shade of red, and by the last sentence, which he struggled to get out, his earlobes were bright red. I listened quietly, took the chain, and let out a small laugh. Then, I gave it a sharp tug, forcing Thomas to bend down. Our faces were inches apart, so close we could feel each other's breath. "Yes," I said, then pressed my lips to his. I'd wanted to do that from the moment I first saw him. Thomas's eyes widened slightly, then he responded with a passionate kiss. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. The next morning, I woke up aching all over, like I'd been run over by a truck. The space next to me was empty. It was a weekend, so Thomas had probably gone to make breakfast. I checked my phone. It was already 10 o'clock. I had an unexpected message from Evan. He hadn't contacted me since he'd hit Thomas. I wondered what he wanted now. I opened it. "Evan, Alex, about what happened before I was impulsive. I'm sorry. How are things with you and Mr. Thomas now? Have you moved out?" I thought for a moment, then typed back, "We're planning to remarry." I turned off my phone, didn't reply further, and got out of bed to get ready. After I was done, I went downstairs and ran right into Thomas, who was coming to wake me up. When he saw the red marks on my neck, his ears turned red again. "Alex, you're awake. I was just about to call you for breakfast." I looked at the lavish spread on the dining table and said suddenly, "Let's go get remarried today." Thomas froze for a second. Then his eyes went wide, his expression one of pure, unadulterated joy. He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "I love you, Alex." I don't know if it was just me, but I thought I heard a sob in his voice. To make sure everyone knew we were remarried, Thomas threw another wedding. He sent invitations to all our relatives, friends, and business partners. He even wrote Evan's invitation by hand. I read it and couldn't help but laugh. Thomas really knew how to hold a grudge. The invitation read, "Thank you, Mr. Evan, for your miraculous healing touch that cured my amnesia. Otherwise, Alex and I wouldn't have been able to remarry so quickly. We sincerely invite you to attend our wedding." I thought Evan wouldn't come, but surprisingly, after receiving that invitation, he actually showed up. He forced a smile when he saw me and said, "You know why the latecomer wins? Because the one who was there first didn't fight for it. I regret not realizing my feelings sooner, not starting to pursue you back in college. All I could say was try to look on the bright side. I hope you find someone you love soon." After we remarried, Thomas became much more open with me. His once cold personality changed a lot. He was becoming more and more like he was during his amnesia. I think it might have been his hidden personality, which I've now unlocked. I wonder, does our situation count as marriage first, love later? In any case, I'm very happy now. And this time, our marriage doesn't have a contract, and it won't expire.